So now I'm here and I'm supposed to introduce the Dean, Dr. Alexander Norbash. I prepared here 45 pages for the introduction, but I think it's too long. The guy is working too much. So, what can I say? I'm so proud to, so excited and honored to introduce Dean Alexander Norbash, BA, MD 1986 of UMKC. He has returned to his alma mater as the Dean of the School of Medicine. Previously, he served as the Chair and Professor of Radiology at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, where he continued to hone his extensive background in research and healthcare collaboration. Prior to UCSD, Dr. Norbash held multiple academic and leadership appointments, including at Stanford University School of Medicine, Harvard University School of Medicine, and Boston University School of Medicine. He's thrilled to return to his hometown of Kansas City and his alma mater, where he received an innovative and exceptional medical education at the UMKC School of Medicine. To him, it's an exciting time for the school and the UMKC Health Science District, and he hopes to enhance and contribute to UMKC upward trajectory. He and his colleagues at the School of Medicine commit to educating their future healthcare leaders, fostering and implementing advances in clinical care, facilitating research and discovery, with the goal of creating great outcomes in our service to the community. UMKC is one of only 20 universities in the US to offer medical education along with dentistry, nursing, and pharmacy on one campus, combined with Children's Mercy, University Health and City, County, and State Health Organization. It offers a unique UMKC Health Science District. Until here, the presentation of what we can know the standard. Now you're going to have my presentation. It's something else. You sit there. Sit there. Sit down there.
What?
Sit down. I have the mic. So, what can I tell you? Now what is important is the sit down, Alex. Don't worry. What is important here is I'm going to add something else to this presentation. Is the human factor, human condition. The oath, Hippocrates oath. This is very important. This is really important, okay? Now remember, Alex used to work with his dad, Mahmoud Norbash. He was a rural doctor in Platte City here in Missouri. He grew up here and he was helping, and his mother used to be in charge of all the cabinet, all the office of her husband, when we didn't have all this kind of computing and electric files. Alex and his young brother used to work in order to file all the dossiers and everything. This is very important. I mean, you know, we are talking about rural community, that's something that we cannot understand. You need to be there in order to see what is done. Alex was there. Alex was just helping, and he saw many patients coming to see his father, and sometimes they were very concerned. They were very sad. They were suffering. They were in pain, and his father was able to help them. He was able to give them some kind of hope and also some healing in order to be the best person. And you know what? His father knew all the families. It was not a question of being a doctor and patients. No, they were friends in the city. And now Alex didn't forget that. Alex wanted to have a very good school of medicine here at UMKC. He wanted to have an excellent, great health leaders. Why? Because it is very important for us to have a recognition, to accept this kind of knowledge, to accept this kind of relationship between the faculty members, students, and patients. You know, I'm so happy. I've been here I was teaching at UMKC for 34 years, and I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of this city. I'm so proud of Midwest. I'm coming there. It was a very long trip for me. I came from Italy. I was born in Italy. I grew up in France. I lived in Puerto Rico, and I got my PhD in Washington, D.C. And I came here. I'm 74, and still, I have so many things. That Alex is great. You're going to see. He's a person. He's an international fellow. Now, Alex, I want you to promise me only one thing. One thing. I'm 74 years old, and I want in 2025 to fly on your helicopter. So I hope you're going to take me. Not too much, for 10 minutes. Just I want to see Kansas City from your helicopter, and I'm going to be very, very, very happy. This is my wish for my resolution for 2020.
You better be careful. An emergency helicopter for a heart attack is not a viewing station.
Oh, wow. No, but I trust Alex. Okay, so please join me and give a big hand to Professor Dean Alex Novak. Thank you, Alexander. Come on, give me the microphone, otherwise I don't stop.
Good afternoon. It is an honor and pleasure to be here. I'd like to share a couple of sentiments, if I may. I would like to thank Dr. Sayed Hassan and Farouk, who have been dear friends of my family for 45 years. Friends with my father who passed away 18 years ago. Thank you for your friendship, your guidance, your mentorship, and all that you represent. Thank you, Dr. I also want to thank you for inviting me to share my perspective with you. I want you to be proud of this university. It's an exceptional place. And it's an exceptional place because of you. And because of the dedication and the blood, sweat, and the tears that you've spent in making it an excellent place. And I say that, and I hope you'll take this the right way, because I've been to a number of places. And I was your average student here. And I did love my literature courses, and I did love my basic science courses. And I had an opportunity, because of Providence, to teach at Stanford and teach at Harvard, and I felt thoroughly prepared, and I felt thoroughly well-rounded, thanks to you. So I thank you for that. I'm proud of our medical school, and I'm proud of our students. They truly, truly are amazing. I thought today would be interesting for you to hear a few things. I thought you'd be interested in hearing about a rural medicine initiative that we have. We have a medical school in St. Joseph. It's our medical school. And our first graduating class is graduating this December the 14th, in a week. And I want you to know a little bit about them so you can be proud of them also and be informed about them. So I'd like to share some thoughts about our rural medicine initiative. I also would like to tell you about a building opportunity we have. We have a giant new building on Hospital Hill that is state-of-the-art and has a number of disciplines within it. And I think you'd be interested in hearing about it. It's a $145 million project. It's the most expensive capital budget UMKC has ever undertaken. And so I think you're interested in knowing where the money is going and what it's doing. And I think you'll be proud to hear about it. And then the third thing is a little more philosophical in terms of what we would like to do looking forward. Discovery is the essential thing that academic medical systems do well. You can have healthcare delivery in Kaiser Medical Center or in the VA hospital or in a number of different locations. We also provide medical care. But innovation, discovery, that's where we truly excel. That's what we're all about. That's why we have an incredible standard of living. It's a little heterogeneous, unfortunately, but we have an incredible standard of living, and we do heroic things because of discovery. And so what we want to do is we want to be better where the discovery mission is concerned, where research is concerned, where novel education and curriculum is concerned. So this is the medical school. It was built in '72. It's a fortress-like structure, and it is attached to University Health, which used to be called Human Medical Center, and I believe most of you are probably familiar with it. However, it is set in a larger setting. That larger setting is adjoining Children's Mercy Hospital. It's in an urban center. It's near an undergraduate university and other graduate schools, UMKCs. Kansas University also has a highly developed medical center and system, but their other campus is far away. And so the very fact that we have this proximity means we have to build a lot of bridges and we have to leverage our strengths. What do I mean by that? I mean, we should be doing a lot of things with the School of Engineering. We should be doing a lot of things with social work, with education, even with the liberal arts. And so one of the things I'd really like to focus on is creating those connections with Volker Campus. That is absolutely essential because it is our distinct strength. The other thing that is of note is we are in a vital and vibrant urban center with a lot of industry, small companies and large companies and foundations. We have to leverage that to advantage. We're not in Des Moines, we're in Kansas City. So we need to use that strength to fuel our innovation and our discovery. So I'd like you to think of what are the advantages and unique attributes of our medical school that make us so special and that we should leverage to truly find excellence. Our medical school was established in 1970 to improve the health of the citizens of Missouri. And by citizens, that means the rural and the urban, the dispossessed and the affluent, all citizens. And the rural citizenry is something that at the outset, our founders really focused on. Dr. E. Gray Diamond, this is his brainchild. And Dr. Novak, he was the first dean. And I think many of you may know him. And so that rural citizenry is something that was in front of mind even when it was formed, even when the medical school was formed. So what's special about our medical school? Well, as you know, it consists of 3 medical schools. It's a 6-year BA/MD program where you enter straight out of high school, and 6 years later you're a physician by getting a bachelor's degree and an MD, saving 2 years, which means, given the same structures and buildings, we can produce 25% more physicians in a place that has an 8-year program. And we have a desperate need for more physicians, so that's a model that we would like to beat our chests about, tell the world about. And the other thing which is important is not just that it's 6 years, but that the value of compassion and the value of mentoring is built into the system and the structure. We create teams. When you're a first and second year student, most of your time is spent on Volker campus, learning the basics that get you your BA. But once you're a 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th year student, you move to Hospital Hill, you get your own little office, and you're part of a team. And that team consists of 2 people who are 3rd year 2, who are 4th year 2, who are 5th year 2, or 6th year, so it's great. It's like a big brother, big sister relationship. And you have a docent, and a docent is a physician who serves as your role model. How does he serve as a role model? Not only does he or she teach you medicine, but that person also teaches you the value of compassion, the laying on of hands, the fact that being a healer means you heal mind, body, spirit, and soul. And that's something that not every place teaches. The compassionate side of medicine is something that was instrumental in how we are composed and how we're structured with these docent teams. You also learn to deal with people who are above you and how you create a learning relationship, which means you function as a team much better than someone who's not taught in that manner. So there are some unique attributes of our school which are really special and explain, in many ways, why our 6-year medical school has survived and so many other ones have gone out of existence. What do academic medical systems do? Well, they provide a lot of jobs, and they're a strong economic engine because they bring in capital, either insurance money that takes care of patients, or grants, federal grants, industrial grants, or creating new small companies. But we're also compassionate care providers. And so I think it's important to keep this in mind as you look at the rest of the presentation and the things that I'm going through today. So again, the 4 things I like to talk about are our rural initiative, how we see discovery, our healthcare design and innovation building, HDIP, and some changes that I'd like to add to our curriculum, which I think will be enriching. Let's start with the rural initiative. Pardon me. Whoops, this is out of sequence. This is a research slide, we'll get to this later. So we're interested in discovery. Medical schools also provide education and train physicians. We're interested in serving the community, and our core competence is discovery, but it is done in the framework of healthcare. So there are several things that we consciously would like to do. The first is we'd like to establish a culture of experimentalism. What does that mean? That means trying new things and doing it in a thoughtful and methodical way, and not being afraid of failing. Because just as Thomas Edison said, I haven't failed 800 ways. I figured out 800 things that don't work. So we have to have that philosophy. We don't want to make stupid mistakes. We don't want to repeat our errors, but we want to understand that experimentation means multiple episodes when things don't work out. And there's a philosophy in many places about how every time we step up to bat, we have to hit it out of the park. That's not the way life works. That's not the way discovery works. So we need to create a culture of experimentalism, and it has several ingredients. 1 is you have to be data-driven. 2, data has to have primacy. 3, every voice needs to be listened to. There are all these structures that go along with saying, yes, we want a culture of experimentalism, so we have to create those ingredients. We also want to be collaborative and maximize our potential. And the only way you do that is by creating teams and forging collaborations and building bridges. You don't realize your potential until you tap the aptitude of everyone who's around the table. You can't just have one strong person leading the charge. You want to learn from everyone. And then finally, entrepreneurialism. What is entrepreneurialism? It's an attitude that every problem has a solution. And if you can just figure out the solution, it's an opportunity. So when somebody who's an entrepreneur is faced with a problem, they don't cross their arms and sit down in the middle of the road saying, oh my gosh, I encountered a problem. They're energized by it, and they realize there is an opportunity because there is a solution. It's an attitude. It's an attitude that allows you to move forward in an optimistic way, seeking novel solutions. So those are the things we'd like to focus on as a medical school. Let me give you an example. So do any of you have Apple Watches or Oura Rings? We all have cell phones, don't we? So there's portable and wearable technology that we have. But nobody has really woven that into the fabric of the healthcare delivery system. You know, you can follow your heart rate, for example, and your sleep habits. But it's unusual for a physician to say to you, show me how you've been sleeping based on your sleep habits because I want to fix that for you. I want to address that for you. I want to provide that extension and connection with me so that I can take better care of you. And so what we would like to consider as an example, and I threw this out as an opportunity, is look at rural patients. There are less physicians out there. So why can't we leverage their Apple Watches and wearable tech into all the things that we can do and do it in a formalized way? And so maybe we'll start with something as simple as blood pressure measurements. If you measure your blood pressure routinely, there's a 25% increased rate of compliance with the blood pressure measurement than if you don't measure it. Why is that? I'm guessing probably because I might add a little less salt to my food. I might skip the ice cream. I might go for a longer walk because I'm cognizant of the fact that measuring my blood pressure is important. So what do? Well, we have to look realistically at people's aptitude and interests, and we connect that to the things that we can do leveraging technology, and we're dynamically improving in a culture of experimentation, and we're ambitious to do things that are new, and using data. So there are opportunities for things like predictive analytics. If you look at the heart rate and the temperature of a person, you can predict if they're going to go into septic shock. So let's say you have wearable technology, and I call you and I say, I'm looking at your measurements from today. You need to go to an emergency room and get an antibiotic cocktail, or you'll go into septic shock, in which case you have a 10% chance of death. Now all of a sudden, that's predictive analytics. we can learn from data science about all these little things that suggest that you're heading in a certain direction, and we can head it off at the pass. So that's the space we like to occupy. Do things that are ambitious, that leverage technology, doing them in partnership with our data science group and engineering, and figuring out what novel therapies can we provide. Dark green is bad. You can see the outline of Missouri. And these are the areas with our shortages of primary care physicians. What you may not know is that we are 41st, 9th from the bottom, out of the 50 states for life expectancy. And most of that is because of the rural, underserved areas we have. 10 Missouri rural hospitals have closed since 2012, so the situation is not getting any better. And as you probably know, a lot of OBGYNs are leaving the state, and we also don't have enough of them. The population greater than 65 years in age has increased by 30% since 2010. And why does that matter? Because out of every 1,000 20-year-olds, 24 are hospitalized. Out of every 1,000 90-year-olds, almost 9 times as many, 224 are hospitalized. So as we age, as we, the boomers, contribute to an aging population, the needs are only becoming greater. And the ingredients are becoming more stark in terms of what we have in terms of physicians and rural practitioners. And that is a problem. The median age in rural locations is 51 compared with 45 in urban locations. So this aging tilt is seen in rural locations even more than in urban locations, with all the challenges that come along with that in terms of geography and distance and the inability to provide service very well. There are many ways of categorizing causes of death. I happen to find this one pretty sensible. It's called the 4 Horsemen. They are cardiovascular disease, kills 19 million people per year. Cancer kills 10 million per year. Metabolic disorders such as obesity, diabetes, hypertension, infectious processes can kill up to 27 million a year. And the neurodegenerative is also a big category. So these are the areas we need to think about in terms of serving the population's needs, whether urban or rural. And when you look at the rural population versus the urban population, almost every disease process is more frequently represented, even independent of the age. This is a problem. Whether it's suicide, unintentional injury, physical inactivity, high cholesterol, hypertension, arthritis, you can see the numbers. Across the board, people who are living the rural life, they're not healthy because they're outdoors. They're actually sicker than we are. And so keep that in mind, please. So what are the solutions that we have? Well, one is to leverage technology, as I mentioned. Look at the things that we can do with things like Apple Watches at a distance. But we also need to create more rural serving positions, and that's what we did in St. Joseph. And we means Marianne Jackson, my predecessor, who had this idea. Mike Wacker, one of our associate senior deans, who wrote a lot of the grants from HRSA that allowed this to come into fruition. The group at Mosaic's CEO and Mosaic's Chief Medical Officer, Mike Poor and Ravin, Mike on his last name. So it took a team of people, in addition to Brenda Shields, the state representative who was able to secure the money. And so that group put this idea together and executed it. And so now we have our first class that's graduating. It focuses on individuals who are from rural locations. We take in about 16 a year. This is Mosaic's Hospital in St. Joseph, which is state-of-the-art. You can see the instructional rooms we've built there with the HRSA grant funding. St. Joseph is in the middle. It's where you see the blue, green, and yellow pins. And the other locations are the outlying clinics that we will send our medical students to. So it's a hub and spoke model. St. Joseph is the hub. It's the hospital that provides sophisticated care. The spokes are these individual other outlying clinics where you have people who are primary care practitioners and they'll have a medical student with them. And so because they're far-flung, we also have housing at each of these locations. We have a couple of satellite hospitals, one in Maryville and one in Albany. And you would not believe the enthusiasm of these primary care practitioners and the hospital administrators of these outlying areas, because we're providing them with their future manpower. Because these students, we're hoping to see this, are more likely to return to those locations that are familiar and serve the needs of the population. location. So it's an incredibly tight-knit team, very much focused on what we're trying to do. We also have, at Mosaic in St. Joseph, we're putting up a $15 million medical education building. The walls are all up right now. They're starting to do the inside work. So this, again, is $15 million from grants that we've secured from the state and from the feds. And again, Mike Wacker's the one who did most of that. So retaining physicians in rural areas is challenging, and there are multiple reasons for that. One of the reasons is that the schools aren't that great. They don't have the same range of schools that we do, and people are worried about their children's education. And also, the way you practice is a little bit different. If you're a physician in a rural location, you don't have a backup to turn to and have somebody help you out if you're getting into trouble. You've got to solve everything. Some people are energized by that and attracted to it and drawn to it, and other people are intimidated by that, or they only want to practice one subspecialty. My wife is a nose and sinus surgeon. She's an ENT. She only likes doing nose and sinus. That's all she practices. She does multiple operations every week, but that's all she wants to do. You can't do that in a rural setting. In a rural setting, you've got to do whatever the patient needs to have done. And so that's something we have to focus on. So we're very proud of that group, and I thought you'd want to hear about it because we do have that first graduating group coming up on the 14th. I'd like to talk a little bit about discovery. We happen to have some major research areas: social determinants of health, for example, looking at homeless care and street care and how can we improve that, or with the dispossessed, what can we do to improve the quality of care? We have neuroscience, vision research, infection, shock, trauma, maternal fetal medicine, implementation science, which means how do you take scientific principles and apply them to practice, and quality improvement and patient safety. I'd like to point out a couple of these where we are better known. Social determinants of health. We have one investigator, Jeanette Berkeley-Patton, who's very skilled in this area, has secured a lot of grant funding, and she utilizes barbershops and churches and has created a dense network to communicate and educate individuals about their health. Whether it's being HIV tested, whether it's learning about hypertension, whether it has to do with diabetes and obesity, she uses all these different channels to educate. She's very, very adept, and we're very proud of the work she's doing. In vision research, we have Peter Coolin, who is currently working on three-dimensional retinal tissue engineered models, so potentially a retinal implant, and they're learning how to connect neurons now. It's got a long way to go, but it's revolutionary. It will make the blind see again, people with macular degeneration. And he has a lot of different things that he's doing in vision science. Infection, shock, trauma. Dr. Cuthbert Simpkins is he's a retired trauma surgeon who's now a scientist full-time. And he's created a substance that is a space filler. So if you're in a traumatic episode and you lose half of your blood, he can replace it, and then you come out of shock. He has a model, a rat model, where you drain half of the rat's blood, and the rat's heart stops beating, and the rat stops breathing, and the rat, to all appearances, is dead. And then he introduces an equal amount of this lipophilic substance, which has little tiny globules in it that are substitutes for the corpuscles, and the rat comes back to life. So it has an infinite shelf life. You don't have to refrigerate it. It's not like blood. And the FDA has allowed him to skip one step of certification, go straight to the second step because it is so revolutionary and so important. So in maternal fetal medicine, we also are a very well-known center for that. So there's certain areas where we stand out. We want to build those even more, but we also want to look at other opportunities that are close by. In terms of School of Medicine funding, you can see the third line is HRSA, and the HRSA money is the money that we're putting into the St. Joseph enterprise. We have already been able to secure $63 million. And again, Mike Wacker is our cardiovascular physiologist who's a scientist, he's a PhD. He's the person who has written up most of those grants. And in terms of NIH funding, we're about $24 million right now per year. Dr. Coolin is the gentleman I mentioned who is doing the retinal prostheses. He also has an early detection method for glaucoma that they can also tell by looking in the eye about Alzheimer's disease and the progression of Alzheimer's disease. So he's trying to create ways of doing minimally invasive diagnoses using different tools. He's heavily funded. He's had over $20 million of grant funding. Dr. John Spurtis, he just secured an $8.3 million grant, a single grant, and he's a physician scientist. He is at St. Luke's, he's looking at 1,000 women who are pregnant and looking at them where hypertension is concerned. Hypertension is the cause of 1/3 of maternal deaths. You may not know that. I was surprised when I saw this. And so this is an important thing to take care of. Greater than 1/3 of maternal deaths are due to hypertension, and he has the opportunity to follow that. Jenny Schuster's been out of her fellowship less than 10 years. She already has $15 million of grant funding. She works on vaccinations and optimizing vaccinations for optimization. She's at Children's Hospital. Dr. Selvarangan has focused on COVID, and he has advanced diagnostics that he's assembled for infectious diseases. He's very well known internationally. Mike Wacker is the person I just mentioned to you, who secured all of our HRSA funding. He's interested in looking at the cardiovascular system and how it crosstalks with bone and with muscle. For example, patients who have renal disease, they release certain substances that we didn't know about before from their bones. So we're learning about cycles and systems we weren't aware of before. Dr. Tracy Johnson focuses on Black pregnancy and risk, and she's put together some informative systems similar to what Dr. Brooklyn Patton has done. And she forges meaningful relationships with patients, focuses on the need for empathy and how we communicate and what we need to communicate. This is Dr. Brooklyn Patton, who I mentioned earlier, who has a tremendous amount of grant funding and is a luminary in the social determinant space. She's connected with over 100 organizations that serves her outreach opportunity, focusing on a number of different diseases. Dr. Simpkins is the surgeon who I just mentioned to you, who's come up with a blood replacement phospholipid nanoparticle. He already has 10 US and 10 international patents, and very creative. We're very proud of him. And Dr. Bridget Jones is also at Children's Mercy Hospital, and she looks at the impact of environmental, chronic, and toxic stress on asthma and the triggering of asthma by environmental variables. So when you look at what we've been doing, and again, our success is going to depend on what we can get in terms of resources. So the funding is an important thing. Children's has about $21 million a year of funding. University Hospital has $110,000. In total, of all the NIH funding, we get about $23 million, as I mentioned earlier. And we're grateful for that, but we would like to increase that amount. We need to recruit some scientists, and we need to create aggregated groups. Dr. Paula Nichols is the chair of one of our basic science departments, and she has thought about how we create clusters of talent. So for example, where social determinants are concerned, social determinants of health, not only Dr. Jeanette Berkeley-Patton works in that space, but so does Dr. Jennifer Allworth and Dr. Stephen Simon. And so by creating these teams, we should be able to even do better on the research side, so being conscious about who we're putting side by side. For shock trauma, again, Dr. Allsworth, Dr. Minghui Fu, and Dr. Simpkins, they would form a team. So again, this is about trying to intentionally form teams so we can be more successful with grant funding. Neuroscience is a big opportunity for us. Dr. Jared Bruce is a professor and in the psychiatry department. Dr. John Wang is an anesthesiologist. Dr. Chu is a basic scientist. Again, you see Dr. Kuhlman on the right-hand side, Dr. Steve Kang, and Carl Kador. Again, and each of them is doing fascinating work, but as we aggregate them, we create these teams that make sense because of proximities, we should be even more successful. I mentioned earlier, maternal fetal medicine is an area where Dr. Nyack and Dr. Malik and Dr. Johnson and Dr. Nichols are working. Dr. Nichols is in the bottom right, and she is the Associate Dean for Research for the School of Medicine. She's the one who's created this team concept as you look from team to team. And patient care is another team. Dr. Spertus is in that. I mentioned earlier, he had the $8 million grant looking at hypertension in pregnant females. Dr. Gary Sutkin is looking at human factors. He is an OBGYN. He does complex pelvic reconstructive surgery. He's interested in understanding where communication breaks down in operating rooms. Is it because there's too much ambient noise? Is it because somebody needs a hearing aid and isn't using it? What's happening? Is it because a command isn't being read back? So he has an NIH grant looking at communication. He has another NIH grant which is looking at external factors. For example, if I'm putting a cannula in someone's pelvis and I need to avoid hitting the bladder, I need to have a certain amount of flexion of my wrist and a certain amount of flexion of my elbow. If I have too flex at the elbow, too flex at the wrist, I'm going to puncture the bladder. So using external images of what the physician is doing as signs that there's going to be an impending disaster. These are called human factors, and that's what Dr. Sutkin is investigating. And I just thought you'd be interested in hearing a little bit about what some of these investigators are doing. But our health science district actually interconnects a lot of different entities. And one of the things that I like to do is, again, as I mentioned, strengthen those bridges, strengthen the relationships. Make sure that children see this as a partner in every enterprise, and we move forward together. And there are a lot of research collaborations going on between different parts of the organization. As Louis mentioned earlier, we do have the dental school, we have the School of Pharmacy, we have the School of Nursing, we have a physician assistant school, we have an anesthesiology assistant school. There are many things that we have as strengths that are living a little bit in isolation and could deserve being interconnected more effectively. These are the listed areas of growth that we've looked to in 2023 and 2024. Digital information, as I mentioned earlier, is a big deal. We have a lot of data. We need to know what to do with it and how to process it. You wouldn't believe how many different data streams exist with an Apple Watch, for example. We need to get our arms around this and have a better understanding of how we can implement it effectively. And in rural health is going to be a large initiative for us simply because of the investments we made in St. Joseph and the fact that it makes a lot of sense. That's an elected area that we really need to focus on. So I thought we'd also like to get a little virtual tour of our healthcare design and innovation building. This is a bird's eye view of our campus. You see 3 little spoked star-like wheels. The top one is the School of Medicine. The one on the left is the School of Dentistry. The bigger one on the right is the new Healthcare Design and Innovation Building. So there are proximities that are going to benefit us. And north is up, south is down, west is left, and east is right. This is the building. You can see it's labeled UMKC HDIB. There's a circular driveway at the bottom right, which is where patients are dropped off for their dental appointments, because 2 floors in this building are going to be dental clinic serving floors. The ground floor is going to have a simulation center, and then we have a 5th floor, which is a shell space, and we're waiting to see what that's going to be best used for before we commit to building it out. This is the northwest corner, which faces the medical school. And this is the main entrance from the medical school side. Northwest corner. This is the northeast corner. We're just going to go clockwise around the building, looking at each of the elevations. And you can see it has a very modern appearance. This is the southeast corner, and the cars that you see on the right side of the screen are dropping off patients for the dental clinic. And this is the southwest corner, which is the main entrance from the dental school side. The lowest floor, bottom left, shows you the simulator space, and I'll show you mock-ups of what that's going to look like. The floor above that includes a health equity suite for Dr. Brooklyn Patton's work and her associates. And in addition to that, there's a space for data science, which will be a satellite of our School of Science and Engineering here. And we also will have a landing site for biomedical engineering. And again, those are sites that are intended to be collaborative to help more tightly connect Volker campus to the medical school. The top 2 floors, level 4 and 3, are the dental clinics, and then level 5 at the top is shell space. This is the entry from the medical school side. As you can see, it's pretty organic and pretty open and well lit. And I'd like to show you 3 of the simulator spaces. This is an exam room. It's like an outpatient exam room as you would have in a doctor's office. You can have a patient who's an actor, and there are multiple microphones and cameras in this room, and you can judge the performance of a medical student based on how they do a physical examination, how they take a history, or do a simple procedure. So this is a basic examination room that's going to be in the simulation center. The next step up is what looks like a regular hospital room. This is what looks like a regular hospital room. Again, it's a simulation room. It can have a mannequin in it, and the mannequins now are very sophisticated. You can have a mannequin that you can experience a childbirth opportunity with. You can have a mannequin that is a patient who is a trauma patient and is crashing, or a little baby. They have all these different physical mannequins. You can start an IV, you can do a physical examination on. They breathe, they blink, they're very realistic. And then the next step up from the simulation lab that looks like a regular patient room is an operating room. We also have 2 simulated operating rooms here, and you can see how groups work together as they work on the mannequins and on the different Of course, we'll also have digital simulation. This is where the task training takes place. If any of you have $80,000 to spare, we can buy this anatomage table, which is in the front, and it's a virtual dissection plane where you can move things around it. What we're trying to understand is, can we get away from cadaveric dissection at some point? And the anatomage tables may allow us the ability to do that. So I thought you'd be interested in seeing what the space looks like. I mentioned the social disparities setting that we have for Dr. Berkeley Patton's work. It includes a test kitchen, because a lot of the problems that the disenfranchised experience have to do with nutrition and with poor choices also. There's ability, but there's also poor choices. The two are going hand in hand. And so the test kitchen is also very important for us. And this is what the northwest corner looks like at night. So I thought you would like me to close by talking about some curricular opportunities. Having graduated from medical school a very long time ago, there are a number of things that I've had to learn since graduating that I wish had been taught to me in medical school. One example is communication. I had to become a certified mediator when I was at UC San Diego because I was asked to create a campus-wide initiative of mediators, and I figured I've got to do it myself if I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. And so just by getting mediator training, I learned to listen. And up until that point in my life, I would try to solve problems, solve conversations, convince others that I was right, rather than listening to what they were saying to me in full. And so I had to learn to listen at an advanced age. And so I wish I had learned that when I was a medical student. I wish I'd learned about entrepreneurialism when I was a medical student. I wish I learned a little something about business when I was a medical student. I wish I learned a little something about leadership when I was a medical student. So that little something, I don't know how many hours, 10 hours or 20 hours, I would like to figure out a way to put that in the curriculum in the first and second year. And we're probably going to start with the leadership piece. What constitutes a good leader? What is situational leadership? What is personal leadership? And so I'd like to do that, give them a little bit of a taste of these things. Now some may do a little bit of entrepreneurialism. They're going to want to take a 3-credit-hour fall course and then get an MBA with an entrepreneurialism focus, which is fine. That's not the intent. We would like to give them additional stuff if they are interested in something. But I feel they need to have a certain minimum of certain things that we don't teach them formally. So that's what I'd like to start exploring. And again, why is it? Well, as I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurs are solution-oriented. Healthcare, there's this unfortunate transition that's taking place. Healthcare has become a big business because there's so much money involved. It's become cold and sterile and depersonalized. And the problem is there's a division line. We have administrators who deal with the money and physicians who are told what to do. Well, the physicians need to understand a little bit about what they're asking for. When they're saying, these are the solutions we need to implement, what are the consequences? What are the approaches? How do we do this? What is a pro forma? What is a business case? How do you assess a business plan? These are not things we're taught in medical school. These are things you learn afterwards if you feel compelled to so do. And I got a healthcare management degree, so I can learn this stuff. But I think we can teach them a lot of bits and pieces and fundamental elements in medical school. And particularly the communication piece, because I think that's the root of everything. So I hope this overview has been interesting for you. I figured you'd be proud to hear about the HDIV, and I just really want to thank you for everything that you've done, for making these opportunities possible for people like me to have an education here and to be able to have a fulfilling professional life. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex. And I'm so happy that you are trying to develop all the rural community aspect of Missouri. I think this is paramount. The idea of the rural community is so isolated sometimes, and you are doing very, very well. And I hope under your control and your authority, your instance, many new works, new grants. You are going to perform a great job. Do you have any questions, please? Check.
With the new administration coming in January, and the likely people that will carry medicine and the various aspects of that, I have very big fear that they'll break down what we are trying to build up. Could you give me your perspective?
Well, I think there are, and I'm by nature an optimist. So there are two perspectives that I have. The first is a lot of the federal mechanisms that fund healthcare are ponderous and slow-moving and very complicated. I don't know that they're that easy to disassemble or to reroute, because these things typically have long cycle times and a tremendous amount of inertia. So I don't think we're going to see things working out overnight. That's my sense. And that's what the experts are telling me right now when I ask them the same question. But I also believe in the need for adaptation. And I think healthcare is extremely expensive. And I also think that it's distributed in an unequal manner. I think the disparities for healthcare in our country are a source of embarrassment. I think most of us get excellent healthcare, but there are people who get healthcare that's worse than developing countries. And you know this when you look at our GDP contributions and our life expectancy and our infant mortality rate and all these other indicators that are really bad. So I think there's a need for some adaptation and change. And maybe this is a stimulus for it. I just don't know. But I think we're all constructed because we fear change inherently. I think if we look back on it at some point in the future, we're going to say, we learned some things from this. There were probably some mistakes, but I don't think it's going to be fatal. I don't think it's going to be a large-scale disaster. That's my sentiment. Just my opinion.
Well, thank you for the wonderful presentation. We learned a lot about what is happening and what might happen. Under your leadership, wish you all the best. One question I want to ask you is, and this I'm saying from experience of having two daughters who went to UMKC Medical School, they are practicing physicians, but I know that when students graduate from medical schools, they are looking for well-paying specialties, and rural still is not on their radar yet. And I don't know if there is a disparity in the salary, but how are you going to encourage the young graduates to opt for that rural practice and career and the challenges you're facing in that?
So Dr. Hassan was pointing out the fact that when I went to medical school, my tuition annually was $4,000 a year. Now the tuition is $14,000 a year, it's 10x. And what happens is the medical students also typically take out loans to cover their lodging and their food and other things. And so they will graduate with a couple $100,000 in debt. $200,000 in debt is not a laughing matter. And so what they will do is they will pick a very high earning specialty in a location where they can have the greatest amount of salary so they can pay off their loans. I think this is an attribution that we make. But I do think that some of those high paying specialties are also inherently interesting. And so it's hard to tease that out and find out how much of a contributor is the fact that the dermatologist makes this much more money when you strip out the fact that this is what the practice of dermatology looks like. I did a dermatology rotation, the very last rotation in medical school. I did it because I thought I could have the afternoons off and go have fun. The reality was I was fascinated by the specialty and I actually enjoyed it and I liked it. And had I taken it earlier, I might have become a dermatologist. And so people would say, you became a dermatologist because they pay the most. I would have become a dermatologist because it was fascinating. So it's hard to de-attribute that. But in terms of mechanistically, what are people doing? An internist in a rural location makes about the same as an internist in an urban location, but they don't make the same as a neurosurgeon or a cardiac surgeon. Procedural medicine here pays a lot in the United States, and so that ends up getting a lot of people. But what's happening is novel financing methods. So one of the things that I'd like to try is after we put this whole thing together and we have a graduating class, I'd like to go county by county and town by town and say, are you willing to do rural loan forgiveness? So, for example, if you could have sponsorship of a medical student by a particular town or county, with the understanding maybe that person is going to serve there for 2 years, and they'll be exonerated, it'll be an internal loan, that might attract people. They've tried this with the public health system. There is a public health system loan forgiveness if you choose to go for the public health system, but that means that you might end up on a reservation someplace. And so I think there's a way to make loan forgiveness part of it to where it will help. But I think we need to come up with a bunch of different things. And I believe that medical school costs way too much in the United States, and we need to figure out alternative sources of funding. But I also think that university education is too expensive, and that is the bigger expense.
Okay. Another question? Yeah, Jane over there.
Yes.
You need the microphone, please.
So there are a couple of things we're trying to do. We're trying to, because of the grant and because of the fact that we promised that we're trying to do this as a separate place, as a separate satellite, we're trying to do as many things as possible on that site. There are some instances where they may have to come down for a rotation, but we try to minimize that. Or they may have to listen to a lecture over Zoom. But I think we all know that Zoom lecture is not the same thing. What we are doing though is, I didn't show this to you, but we have educational rooms where we promote team learning. What that means is it's 8 to 10 people at a table, and it's a bunch of different tables, and each one has a giant screen, and you can have other people participating virtually with you while you participate in a small group. So we're trying to leverage technology to allow us to do that work. We have an identical set of tables and location in St. Joseph as we do in Kansas City. So that we're trying to create a seamless experiment. This is the first year. I will tell you the students are doing very well on standardized exams, better than average, better than our average. And they're all enthusiastic and they're all very positive about the experience. But I think this is going to evolve over time and we're going to learn how to do it better.
One more quick question. The projects that you're working on in rural communities, I would assume that many of those will translate into urban communities too, is that correct?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And so what we learn in the rural community might actually also reflect on the urban dispossessed, which is also core to our mission. And that's, we have a safety net hospital. And so we have to commit to executing that charge. So we're committed to the urban core, but we're also trying to figure out what we can do about the rural populations. Your point's well taken, yes.
Very good. Any other question? Yes?
How would one go about finding out more about the various initiatives and donating to specific ones? And second question, what kind of interface is there within the School of Nursing?
So I actually have, for the first time, 2 development people full-time at the School of Medicine. I have one person responsible for gifts and another one responsible for alumni relations, and they're both spectacular. So I can put you in touch with them. I wish there was a way to project my cell phone number. I can say it out loud if you like.
Well, if I go to the website, I look for alumni relations and what was the other position?
Major gifts and alumni position, and alumni relations. Major gifts and alumni relations. But I also have my card and my cell phone number on it, and I can hand it out to you.
Okay.
But, yeah, so we do have those 2 people, and they're very engaged and they're very methodical in terms of how we're approaching the space. In terms of linkages with the School of Nursing, we have a few projects that are ongoing. I feel like we can have multiples of that. It really has to be intentionally done. It has to be intentionally pursued. And the good news is that the dean of the school, pharmacy and nursing, are very collaborative. It's just something that hasn't been the focus of attention for all these years. We talk about the fact that there's great potential, but I think we can realize it with specific projects that we can all beat our chest about and unstate and verbalize. And so that is not something that has happened yet. The potential has not been realized. We also have an opening with the dean of the School of Dentistry, and so we're going to make sure that we reinforce that need for collaboration as the candidates are going through. You're right, that's a great opportunity.
Thank you.
Yes, Jenny?
You mentioned early on the focus on compassion in your training, and how do you see realizing that? Is it partly in the selection process of your candidates, or how is that built into your curriculum?
I think it's nature plus nurture. I think there are certain people who are more compassionate, and that rubric has to contribute to your selection bias. So I think you have to pick people who are nicer, rather than try to avoid the prima donnas and people who keep talking about I, and me. So part of it's selection, and then the other part is reinforcement based on the herd. If it's something that's valued and it's reinforced continuously, it's part of who you are. But it has to be done consciously. There has to be intentionality to it. It doesn't happen accidentally. It's a value that was talked about by the founders of the school, and it's just been perpetuated from generation to generation. Compassion, kindness, caring, not calling a patient by their first name, being respectful, maintaining eye level. If they're in a bed, you sit down in a chair next to them instead of lording over them with your white coat on. So just being conscious of all that stuff and being reminded of it continuously. And that's something that my 2 docents did. I had one docent for my 3rd and 4th year, another one for my 5th and 6th year, and they were both very compassionate people. One was Larry Dahl, who was head of infectious disease at that point in time. And he had just come from UC AIDS patient in 1983, and he died. And he was probably 24 years old at the time. And he went through this horrible, horrible decaying process. And Larry kept talking about, Alex, you need to keep going in that room. And at the time, we thought it was highly contagious. And at the time, we wear masks and gloves and everything. And he said, Alex, you gotta make a point of going in there and having presence with him. Don't leave him alone in that isolation room all the time. He's only 24 years old. And so it was something that stuck with me. Be compassionate, keep considering perspective of the patient, which we're not good at. We all live in our own little tiny wedge of civilization, not realizing what we look like from the outside. And so Larry did that, and then after him, Harry Gibbs was my other person. He was this cardiologist who was, again, very compassionate, very thoughtful, very intentional. So that's a big deal. That whole compassion piece, that's huge. You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay.